But that's not what the Second Amendment is about. It certainly gives us a guarantee of the capacity to own those firearms that we use in hunting. But let me describe what I believe the Second Amendment is and why it's important. First of all, it protects our families. We have a constitutional right granted to us in the wisdom of our forefathers to protect our families, to protect them from criminals, to protect them from whatever might harm them. And that it is as much of a constitutional right as it is the right to speak out against our government. And let me be very clear, I do not believe the Second Amendment has any geographical boundaries. It does not apply differently on the East Coast than it does in the South. There should be no sense in which people believe that there can be a different set of gun laws that somehow control the Second Amendment in urban areas than in rural areas. If that were the case, the Founding Fathers would have put some type of restrictive language in the Second Amendment, which they did not. That's why I support the Castle Doctrine and believe that it ought to reign true, where people have a right to protect themselves and that they shouldn't have to prove that they were protecting themselves when in fact they were defending their own property and their own families. I believe that in protecting our families, we have a right to those opportunities for protection. That's why in our state, like so many, we have a concealed carry law. As far as I know, I was the first sitting governor in America to complete the course and to get a concealed carry permit. And I've told some hostile crowds, be careful, don't mess with me. It's also important to realize that we've recently seen an assault on the Second Amendment in the aftermath of a natural disaster, and I'm speaking of Katrina. It was an outrageous assault by the police when they began to take the firearms away from law-abiding citizens, frankly, who were themselves their only defense against criminal. And once again, a reminder of the importance of the Second Amendment, because sometimes one cannot wait on another, and particularly government, to come and to protect one's home and one's life. The Second Amendment is also about preserving our freedom. Again, I think sometimes people think it's all about hunting, but it's really about our freedom. It is the last goal line, the last bastion of defense against even our own government should it go completely awry and turn into tyranny. And I know that sounds a little radical in this day and time, and some people don't understand it, but if they really would think through it, they would realize that an unarmed citizenry is a citizenry that has no capacity against even its own government, should its government forget what it's supposed to do. I also believe that that means that our laws should always be under the aegis of the United States Constitution, and we should never, ever even contemplate having Americans under some type of international law influenced by or even tolerate judges who would try to interpret our Second Amendment in light of some international law designed by the UN or carried out by others. The Second Amendment also does something that is kind of important to some of us. It can provide, not maybe all, but some of our food. Now, I know different people hunt for different reasons. Many people hunt strictly for trophies. Quite frankly, I'm more of the meat hunter than I am the trophy hunter. We try to keep venison in our freezer because I like it and it's good. So if the choice is between waiting and waiting and waiting and going after some trophy or putting something in the freezer, I know this will be an anathema to some of you, but I go for the freezer. I'll let you put something on the wall. Just the way I was brought up. In part because as a kid growing up, hunting was a way of life. It was a way of culture in South Arkansas, where I came from. By the way, for those of you that may not know, I was born and raised in a little town called Hope, Arkansas. I just wanted to let you know that not everybody coming from Hope, Arkansas has a problem with the Second Amendment. Some of us grew up believing it's a wonderful and great thing. I grew up in a household where my father was a fireman for the City of Hope. He worked on his days off as a mechanic rebuilding car generators. There was never a day in my dad's life when he didn't have the work of the day still in his hands. I tell people the best way to describe my childhood is that the only soap that we had in our house when I was a kid was lava soap. Some of you can understand that, and what that really means is that I was in college before I found out that it's not supposed to hurt when you take a shower. Today, people pay a couple of $100 for an exfoliation. 50 cents will get you a bar of lava, and it'll do the same thing. But hunting, for many of us who grew up with it, is also about teaching safety and teaching the basic understandings of sportsmanship as well as the rules and the value of conservation. It's always of interest to me when people who have never held a firearm in their lives or owned one seem to have such an amazing insight into how the rest of us should handle them, more importantly, as to the nuances of them or the value. When the fact is, if it weren't for those of us who buy the hunting licenses, those of us who actually own firearms, those of us who enjoy the outdoors, there wouldn't be enough money to preserve the wildlife, and if it weren't for the harvest of many of the species of wildlife, there wouldn't be enough habitat to sustain the species, and we would be looking at something far more endangered than our gun rights. It would be the very species that many of us love not just to go out and hunt, but to watch in their natural habitat, which sometimes is one of the greatest experiences in the world. To watch mallards come in a flock, cup their wings, and land but a few feet in front of you on a cold winter day near Stuttgart, Arkansas, is just about as close to heaven as I think one can get on this earth. And as one who believes, because of my faith, that I'm going to heaven, I'm pretty sure there will be duck hunting in heaven, and I can't wait. Let me also mention that I think the Second Amendment has another response or a role, and that is that it's a way that we pass on our firearms. And when I say pass on our firearms, I really mean it in the sense that for many of us, one of the greatest treasures we have is not the firearm, it's the memories that go with it. Not many people who own firearms decided at age 40 or 50 to go out and purchase one, particularly if it's for sport or for hunting. It relates back to the memories of a childhood where typically a father would take his son hunting and teach him the rules of the use of that firearm, but also teach him the basic understanding of conservation and the way of the wild. Many of us have guns in our gun safes that don't have great monetary value. I've got an old 20-gauge shotgun that has rust on the barrel. If I took it to a pawn shop, I'd be lucky to get $10 out of it. But you couldn't buy that gun from me for $1 million. I'll come to think of it, for $1 million, I'll let you have it. But it'd take almost that much, because while that gun has no particular significant monetary value and probably wouldn't get a shell all the way through the barrel anymore, it's a gun that my dad owned and gave to me. And every time I see it in that gun safe, though I don't use it to hunt, I think about not only him, but I think about times that he and I were together. And those are memories that, even though he's been gone for 11 years, those memories will last with me for the rest of my life. I'll pass my own guns on to my kids, and I hope that they can have some of the pleasant memories with times that we've had, just as I do. And I say that because in many families there are certain heirlooms that give one a great sense of personhood and identity. I can't think of a father saying, "Son, when I die, I'm going to leave you a PlayStation." Although I'm sure some kids would say, "Dad, I hope you do."